Swedish is the official language of Sweden and is spoken by the vast majority of the 9.5 million inhabitants of the country. It is a North Germanic language and quite similar to its sister Scandinavian languages, Danish and Norwegian. History of Swedish. For most of its history, Sweden was a larger country than today. At its height in 1658, the Swedish Empire comprised the territories of what is Finland and Estonia, as well as parts of Russia, Latvia, Germany, Denmark and Norway. Hence, Sweden's linguistic landscape has historically been very different from that of today. Swedish evolved from Old Norse around the 14th and 15th century, and historically, the Swedish dialects were generally much more different than today. Since the 20th century, Standard Swedish prevails throughout the country. The Scandinavian languages constitute a dialectal continuum, and some of the traditional Swedish dialects could equally be described as Danish or Norwegian. Finnish was the majority language of Sweden's eastern parts, though it was used almost exclusively as a spoken language. These areas were also home of a significant Swedish-speaking minority. Finnish became a minority language in the West as well, since many Finnish speakers migrated there. Estonian was the language of the majority in Swedish Estonia, but the province, like Finland, hosted a Swedish-speaking minority and also a more significant minority of Germans. In medieval Sweden, the Low German language had a very important role as a commercial language and the lingua franca of the Hanseatic League. As such, the Low German language influenced Swedish and other languages in the region considerably. In medieval Stockholm, half of the population were Low German speakers. Low German was also the language spoken in the 17th century Swedish territories in northern Germany, i.e. Swedish Pomerania, Bremen, Verden, Wismar and Wildshausen, and by the German minority in Estonia and Swedish Livonia. Livonia was also inhabited by Latvians, Estonians and Livonians. In Swedish and Greer, apart from Swedish, also Finnish, Ingran and Voshian were spoken. Latin as the language of the Catholic Church was introduced in Sweden with the Christianization around AD 1000. As in most of Europe, Latin remained the lingua franca and scholarly language of the educated communities for centuries in Sweden. For instance, Carolus Linnaeus' most famous work, Systema Naturae, published in 1735, was written in Latin. During the 18th century, French was the second language of Europe's upper classes, and Sweden was no exception. The Swedish aristocracy often spoke French among themselves, and code switching between French and Swedish was common. The Swedish king Gustav III was a true Francophile, and French was the common language at his court. Gradually, Sweden lost its overseas possessions and obtained its current borders in 1809, when it lost its eastern part to the Russian Empire. As a consequence, Sweden became a rather homogeneous country, with the exceptions of the indigenous Sami people and the Finnish-speaking Tornedalians in the northernmost parts of the country. During the 19th century, Sweden became more industrialized, resulting in important demographic changes. The population duplicated and people moved from the countryside to towns and cities. As a consequence of this and factors such as generalized education and mass media, the traditional dialects began to give room for the standard language. A large number of Swedes also decided to emigrate, especially to the United States. The Swedes came in contact with the English language. Since then, as in the rest of Europe and much of the world, English has grown as an important foreign language in Sweden, especially since the Allied victory in World War II. During the second half of the 20th century and the first decade of the 21st century, Sweden has received great numbers of immigrants who speak languages other than Swedish. It is unclear to what degree these communities will hold on to the languages and to what degree they will assimilate Swedish. the Kingdom of Sweden as a nation-state for the Swedish people, and as such the national language is held in very high regard. Of Sweden's roughly 9 million people, almost all speak Swedish as at least a second language, and the majority as a first language. Swedish is also an official language in Finland, where it is spoken by a large number of Swedish-speaking Finns. The language is also spoken to some degree by ethnic Swedes living outside Sweden. For example, just over 500,000 people of Swedish descent in the United States speak the language, according to Ethnologue. Dialects. A number of Swedish dialects exist, some of which are divergent enough from Standard Swedish to be considered separate languages. Westrobodnian is a common name used to refer to a number of closely related Germanic, North Germanic languages spoken in historical Westrobodnia bordering areas, with speakers of Sami to the west, Meänkieli Finnish to the north, Jämtlandic to the southwest, and dialects of National Standard Swedish to the south. Like other Scandinavian languages, all different forms of Westrobodnian originate in Proto-Norse and dialects of Old Norse that started diverging as distinct languages during the Viking Age. Dialects differ greatly between different areas, and the language has traditionally merely been a spoken language since no standard spelling was available. The following cities and surrounding villages have a traditionally Westrobodnian-speaking population: Piteå, Skellefteå, Umeå, Luleå, and Kalix. Dalecarlian. The Dalecarlian dialect group is highly divergent, even within itself, so that speakers of separate subdialects do not always understand each other. Dialects of this group are spoken in the northern parts of the province of Dalarna, especially in the Älvdalen municipality, by a population of 1,500. Modern Gutnish exists as a spoken language in Gotland and Faroe. It is an open issue whether modern Gutnish is to be considered an independent language or a Scandinavian dialect. It derives, however, from Old Gutnish, which is indisputably a separate branch of the Old Norse language family. Jämtlandic, spoken mainly in Jämtland, but with a scattered speaker population throughout the rest of Sweden. Jämtlandic Jämtska is a West Scandinavian language with 95% lexical similarity to Norwegian and Swedish, but generally more archaic. It has a native speaker population of 30,000. Scanian, spoken in the Swedish province of Scania. The Scanian dialect is considered by some to be a dialect of Danish, and a related dialect is also spoken in Bornholm, where it is called East Danish. The variety generally spoken today is heavily influenced by Standard Swedish. Recognized minority languages. In 1999, the Minority Language Committee of Sweden formally declared 5 minority languages of Sweden: Finnish, Meänkieli, the Sami languages, Romani, and Yiddish. Finnish. Today there are about 470,000 Finnish speakers in Sweden. Finnish, a Uralic language, has long been spoken in Sweden, as Finland was part of the Swedish kingdom for centuries. Ethnic Finns constitute up to 5% of the population of Sweden. A high concentration of Finnish speakers resides in Norrbotten. Meänkieli is also a Finnic language, spoken by the Tornedalian people. It is so closely related to Finnish that they are mutually intelligible, and is sometimes considered a dialect of Finnish. Meänkieli is mainly used in the municipalities of Gällivare, Haparanda, Kiruna, Pajala, and Övertorneå, all of which lie in the Torne Valley. Between 40,000 and 70,000 people speak Meänkieli as the first language. Sami. The Sami people are a people indigenous to all of northern Scandinavia who speak a closely related group of languages usually grouped together under the name Sami, but at least 3 separate Sami languages are spoken in Sweden. They are, like Finnish and Meänkieli, Uralic. Prolonged exposure to Germanic language-speaking neighbors in Sweden and Norway causes them to have a large number of Germanic loanwords not normally found in other Uralic languages like Finnish, Estonian, or Hungarian. Between 15,000 and 20,000 Sami people live in Sweden, of whom 9,000 are Sami language speakers. Worldwide, between 20,000 and 40,000 people speak Sami languages. In Sweden, the largest concentrations of Sami language-speaking Sami are found in the municipalities of Arjeplog, Gällivare, Jokkmokk and Kiruna, and its immediate neighborhood. Romani is the language spoken by the Romani people, a nomadic ethnic group originating in northern India. Due to the geographic origins of its speakers, Romani is an Indo-Aryan language, closely related to languages spoken in modern-day India, and sometimes written with an Indic script. Around 90% of Sweden's Romani people speak Romani, meaning that there are approximately 9,500 Shub speakers. In Sweden, there is no major geographic center for Romani like there is for Finnish, Sami, or Meänkieli, but it is considered to be of historical importance by the Swedish government, and as such the government is seen as having an obligation to preserve them, a distinction also held by Yiddish. Yiddish is a Germanic language with significant Hebrew and Slavic influence, written with a variant of the Hebrew alphabet and, formally, spoken by most Ashkenazi Jews. Although the Jewish population of Sweden was traditionally Sephardic, after the 18th century, Ashkenazi immigration began, and the immigrants brought with them the Yiddish language. Like Romani, it is seen by the government to be of historical importance. The organization Sällskapet för Jiddisch och Jiddisch Kultur i Sverige has over 200 members, many of whom are mother tongue Yiddish speakers, and arranges regular activities for the speech community and in external advocacy of the Yiddish language. As of 2009, the Jewish population in Sweden was estimated at around 20,000. Out of these 2,000–6,000 claim to have at least some knowledge of Yiddish according to various reports and surveys. The number of native speakers among these has been estimated by linguist Mikhail Parkville to be 750–1,500. It is believed that virtually all native speakers of Yiddish in Sweden today are adults, and most of them elderly. Swedish Sign Language. Swedish Sign Language is an officially recognized minority language. Foreign languages. Since the Middle Ages until the end of World War II, Germany was usually the country outside Scandinavia having the closest cultural, commercial and political relations with Sweden. Thus, study of the German language had always been promoted by the Swedish state as the main foreign language. Many of Sweden's administrative and social institutions, including the education system, had also been organized along the German and Prussian model, as a lot of Swedish pioneering intellectuals of the 17th century had been educated in German universities. This changed after the end of the Second World War, when it was no longer acceptable to emphasize a closer link with defeated Germany. A majority of Swedes, especially those born after World War II, are able to understand and speak English thanks to trade links, the popularity of overseas travel, a strong American influence, especially in regards to arts and culture, and a tradition of subtitling rather than dubbing foreign television shows and films. English, whether in American, Commonwealth, or British dialects, became a compulsory subject for secondary school students studying natural sciences as early as 1849 and has been a compulsory subject for all Swedish students since 1952, when it replaced German as a compulsory language subject. Depending on the local school authorities, English is currently a compulsory subject from 3rd until 9th grade, and all students continuing in secondary schools study English for at least another year. Most students also learn one and sometimes two additional languages, the most popular being German, French and Spanish. For the autumn semester 2014, Mandarin Chinese is proposed as a fourth additional language. Some Danish and Norwegian is, at times, also taught as part of the Swedish course taught to native speakers of Swedish to emphasize differences and similarities between the languages. The role of English. There is currently an ongoing debate among linguists whether English should be considered a foreign or second language in Sweden due to its widespread use in society. This has also triggered opposition. In 2002, the Swedish government proposed an action plan to strengthen the status of Swedish, and in 2009 Swedish was announced the official language of the country for the first time in its history. Immigrant languages. Like many developed European countries from the late 1940s to the 1970s, Sweden has received tens of thousands of guest workers from countries in southern Europe. Second and third generation Swedes of Southern European descent adopted Swedish as the main tongue, or in addition to their immigrant languages, such as Bulgarian, Greek, Italian, Bosnian, Serbian, Croatian, and Turkish. However, the criteria in European Charter for regional and minority languages state that minority languages need a long history in the country to receive the classification, and thus these languages have not come into question.